Okay, thank you. Can you see as a slideshow version of the presentation? Perfect. So, hello everyone. Today I will talk about the conflict sensitivity gap, evaluating environmental and social safeguards and governance in voluntary carbon markets through RED+. And this is from my PhD dissertation and still an ongoing process. So all the results I will present today is preliminary findings, so I'm not drawing strong conclusions. And this is just part of the dissertation. It is not like the whole research scope. So how I will do that, I will first give you a brief introduction about the carbon markets, what is its governance structure and actors, and then I will provide 2 cases I chosen for this study, and then I will give information about safeguards and some conflict sensitivity conclusions, and then my references. So because of the increasing impact of the climate change, most of the actors came up with some solutions and they offer some mechanisms that can help to combat climate change. And in terms of finance, carbon markets became a very popular tool to use by companies, governments, and non-state organizations. It is about assigning a monetary value to carbon dioxide equivalents. So basically, it is about companies, they are producing emissions, and through buying some carbon credits from organizations which are protecting the environment, they are trying to offset their emissions. And there are 2 ways of doing that. One of them is compliance, the other one is voluntary. Compliance is regulated area like European Union, which state control how much emission a company can produce and all other regulated issues regarding emissions, and voluntary is not regulated. So the idea is that companies can produce as much as emissions as long as they are buying some credits. And for the actors, they are calling it carbon markets jungle because there are many mechanisms, many actors involved. But today, we will only focus on voluntary carbon markets, not regulated one, because these cases are coming from that area. And in terms of the main actors, there are standard setters, which are providing some certifications for the projects, project developers, they are developing projects in generally the global south countries to protecting the environment. And there are audit bodies, which are validation and verification body, and credit buyers, mostly companies or organizations. And all of these actors are mainly non-state actors. And RED+, which is a separate UN mechanism, has been starting to use for as carbon credits projects. I chose RED+ because it is very important. It consisted of more than 25% of the all credits. And even though the carbon market is a finance mechanism, it is happening in countries that are conflict sensitive. So having conflict sensitive approaches matters because whether they are having or not, they are affecting conflict-driven areas. And currently, over 500 million carbon credits issued under RED+ projects. And there are some challenges regarding carbon markets. There are over-crediting crises, like some of the investigation find out that, especially for RED+ projects, provide up to 90% less climate benefit than claimed. There is a weak governance system, especially for safeguards, because it is not happening in the regulated area. And there are many actors' involvement. So it is hard to provide a strong governance structure for voluntary carbon markets. And despite it is gaining many attention, it has its usage is increased recent years tremendously. Deforestation still persists. And there are also scientific dispute about it, whether it is working or not. There are critics saying that this is the symptom of greenwashing. So my research is not about if carbon markets is working or not. It is about if actors will continue using it and expanded it. How about making it more responsible? That's why the environmental and social safeguards are so important, because safeguard implementation in these carbon credits raises concerns about its legitimacy, accountability, and effectiveness. Especially, they are crucial to protect human rights and biodiversity and promoting benefit sharing for the communities. And my research question is a full of mouth. How do multi-level governance arrangements, corporate accountability mechanisms, and epistemic architecture interact to shape safeguard outcomes? And do these frameworks adequately account for conflict-sensitive contexts in voluntary carbon markets? So in order to do that, I examine safeguards as 3 levels of governance analysis. One of them is norm translation. I use Cancun safeguards for RED+, which are the environmental and social safeguards, how it is translated from UNFCCC international level to project level. The other one is accountability mechanism. Most of the research focusing on supply side, which is certifier, project developer. This research focusing on demand side. How about the credit buyers? Are there any companies who are taking accountability if any issues happening in the projects they bought? And epistemic architecture, which is whose knowledge counts and what are the indigenous and local knowledge. And I'm fitting all this into a broader context of adaptive governance and this 3 level of analysis, how they are speaking to knowledge integration, decision-making mechanism, and conflict sensitivity and adaptiveness. And for this presentation only, we will look at conflict sensitivity. And I choose 2 projects. One of them is Kariba Red Plus. It is from Zimbabwe. It was run from 2011 to 2023. It got terminated because they found out that 57% of the credits shouldn't be exist. And there were many corporate buyers like Gucci, Volkswagen, Nestle, KPMG, McKinsey. It was a mega project. That's why I have chosen it. The second one is Alto Mayo from Peru. It started in 2008 and it still continues. And it is shown as a success story. So I chose 2 mega projects. One of them look at failure, the other one looking at success and what are the lessons learned there. Even the both of them, Alto Mayo is looking like success. It's created conflict between local conservationist people and the local conservationists and indigenous people and local communities there. Meanwhile, the Kariba one also had many conflicts, human wildlife conflicts, again, local community conflicts. So, and conflict sensitivity also says that conflict fragility directly degrades environmental project quality. And throughout this research, I have seen that overcrediting and conflict sensitivity are not separate problems. They are actually structurally very linked because there are many land tenure issues, indigenous consent issues in conflict fragile areas. And if they are trying to bypass it, it is more likely that overcrediting also happens. So it affects all the governance structure. And all in this carbon credit system, there is no conflict assessment was required or conducted before or after doing the project operation because they are seeing it as separate, even though they are operating in conflict sensitive areas. And there are 4 main conflict drivers in RED Plus projects. Again, this is a preliminary finding. It's not a strong conclusion, but I would like to say that one of them is injustices and restrictions over full access and control of forest resources, creation of new forest governance structure that change relationship between stakeholders and the forest, exclusion of community members, and high project expectations because carbon credits project drew a lot of attention in terms of revenue. So it creates a lot of expectations and sometimes it is not meeting the expectation, which also is a chance to increase the conflict in those areas. And a functional conflict sensitive framework requires not just per-project conflict assessment, but a genuine accessible grievance mechanism. Rather than seeing it as a checklist, it should be an organic process that should embed it in the system. Especially after the Kariba project, there are some new updated requirements regarding safeguards and stakeholder engagement from the main standard setter, but still these are not enough and it raises a lot of concern. And again, just to give you an examples, what is missing is per-project conflict risk assessment, independent community verification, conflict-sensitive project design, mandatory benefit sharing agreement, disclosure of unresolved land tenure disputes. And these are not the solutions for the problem because every solution, again, depending on the actors who will implement them, but this might help for implementing a better safeguards. And future research, conflict sensitivity gap is not merely a social justice problem. It is same problem expressed in 2 registers. Ignoring conflict context can generate both over credits and community harm simultaneously. And thank you so much for your time and attention. These are my references.
Woohoo! And 1 second to spare after references. Amazing. Buket, thank you so much for such fascinating and insightful research that you've been doing. What is the say, because you went through a lot of the obviously the problems and kind of where you see room for improvement, which kind of stole some of my questions away. But if, given limited resources and perhaps limited interest or in this conflict sensitivity gap revisions or solutions, kind of where would you recommend policymakers start or the public start, or kind of where would you see the biggest impact for starting action?
Mhm. As a starting point, definitely acknowledging it, because conflict sensitivity is not only unique to peace builders or development. So carbon credits might look like a separate finance mechanism, but nothing is technical. Everything happening in the field has a policy side and social side. So it's about creating social paradigms that speak to people and protecting both communities and the environment. So acknowledging that will be a good first step.
Fantastic. All right. Well, very excited for then our next panelist. Safwan, are you ready?
I'm ready. I will
Or when
share
you're
my
ready, I
screen.
should say.
Yes, I will do. Yes. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. I will start. Yes. Good afternoon again. My name is Safwan Alhaiek from Syria. Actually, before I start, I want to give you one simple idea that frames this presentation. In conflict-affected regions such as Syria, environmental change is not just an environmental issue. It becomes a driver of a crisis. Today, I will discuss how climate change, conflict, and environmental degradation interact in northwest Syria, and how these combined pressure affected agriculture, soil health, and local livelihoods in Syria. These presentations draws on my recent research with published in UK and field experience in conflict-affected areas for more than a decade. Why this topic is very important? If you know, Syria is currently facing one of the world's most humanitarian and environmental crises. According to the many resources, more than 13 million people are food insecure in Syria now. The key message from this slide is that climate change is not acting alone. It interacts with conflict and environmental degradation, creating multiple pressure on communities that depend on agriculture for survival. I mean, Syria. Most of people in Syria depend on agriculture as a resource of income. Understanding this interaction is essential for designing activity resilience strategy, effective resilience strategies for the future. This photo from my camera in my city drought. This slide highlights the relationship between climate change, conflict, and environmental degradation in Syria. What happened in Syria before the conflict and before the conflict? More frequent droughts and water scarcity reduce agriculture production. Conflict damages infrastructure in Syria and weakness institutions. Together, these pressure increase food insecurity, displacement of people, and vulnerability among rural communities. Soil in Syria, as you know in the photo, soil degradation has become a major challenge in Syria. Water scarcity has forced many farmers in northwest Syria to rely on untreated wastewater for irrigation, increasing the risk of soil contamination. At the same time, soil fertility is declining due to the environmental stress and unsustainable land practices. Also, conflict has further restricted access to the safe water source and regular irrigation system. These challenges not only threats agricultural production, but also contribute to public health risk in Syria. That what happened in 2022 and 2023, huge number of people affected by cholera outbreak in Syria, and according to the data, approximately 100 people died due to the cholera. Now, I will talk about my recent research, which published in UK recently. My research examined the climate trends and farmer experience in northwest Syria. Analyzing for 44 years of climate data shows a clear warming and drying trend. Farmers report increasing water storage, crop losses, for example, and higher production risk. As you know, women and a vulnerable household are one of the most affected because they have fewer resources to adopt in Syria. To better understand environmental risk in Syria, I am talking about another article. We conducted the first systemic soil baseline assessment in northwest Syria. We collected 66 soil samples from 21 locations. Samples were analyzed using advanced laboratory technique to identify potentially toxic element. Of course, the laboratory was in UK. This study provides important evidence for the future environmental monitoring and management, and it's very important regarding the Syria context. And now I will talk the result of our study in Syria. The result demonstrated significant spatial variation in soil contamination and elevated concentration of some heavy metals were identified in several locations in northwest Syria also. This finding suggests that both natural condition and human activity contribute to environmental pressure in the region. It is very important to highlight the need of monitoring all the soil in Syria at the current situation. Now, I will talk about this slide. Highlights the core idea of my and environmental degradation do not operate separately in northwest Syria. Climate water availability for farming. At the same time, conflict stop institutions and weakness the capacity to adopt and manage natural resource. Environmental degradation further increase exposure to environmental shocks, contamination risk also in Syria. When these factors interact, they reinforce each other and create a cycle of increasing vulnerability across rural community in Syria. Pathway to resilience. Despite these challenges, when we see all the challenges. Despite these challenges, there are opportunities to strengthen resilience. For example, climate smart agriculture, sustainable soil management, and community-based adaptation can only play important roles. Example include farmers field school, improving irrigation practices, composting, and woman-led livelihood initiative in Syria. Now, I would like to leave you with 4 key messages. Number one, first, environmental degradation acts as a risk multiplier. Second, climate change and conflict create interconnected challenges. Number three, sustainable recovery required in integrated approach in Syria. And finally, locally driven solutions are essential for building resilience in conflict-affected communities. And the final message is sustainable peace cannot be achieved without restoring environmental system and climate resilience in Syria. Thank you very much for your attention. This is the references.
All right. So fascinating, and a whole minute to spare. I apologize I was so engaged, I forgot to give you the 5, so I gave you a 4 and a 2. Anyway, so my follow-up
I will stop
question. Yeah. So, I mean, well, throughout your presentation, I was wondering, Syria is often discussed and I think presented to non-Middle East and specifically, obviously, non-Syrian conflict experts as through either a lens that's about conflict or climate disaster. So, with your research, what does your research reveal that you think we miss, or the global community misses when we try to treat these challenges separately?
Yes, the key messages I would like to explain for all the audience that unfortunately most of people don't have any let me say how to know the relationship between conflict and climate change and what happened during conflict in any context. It is important to understand very well any context before when you need to for example to study any context is very important, and to study the relationship between interaction factors such as climate change, conflict, displacement, mobility, for example, and to understand all these factors is very essential for any researcher. For example, in Syria, there are a lot of issues in Syria due to that conflict. And now we are suffering, for example, an environmental issue after the conflict, because conflict is end, but the impact of conflict will continue for generations.
Okay. And Aleena, would you like to go? When you're ready?
Right, thank you. My screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So my paper is qualitative case study paper, because I started doing research on disaster management after I saw that Pakistan was hit with massive floods in 2010 first, and then 2022. And there was a great loss. And I then started working on how this is done, what is disaster management cycle, how this can be mitigated and all that. So a disaster management cycle is an ongoing process through which governments, societies, and relevant stakeholders plan to reduce and avoid the effects of any disaster that has been hit to the country or any region, and they respond quickly and appropriately during and right after the disaster. And all the steps that are being taken after the disaster hit, and whatever steps are needed to recover from that disaster, whether it's human loss, it's financial loss, it's the loss of the building and infrastructure. So this is the disaster management cycle. Whenever we are in disaster, any disaster hit the country, we need an emergency communication services. There are three kinds of emergency communication. First is A to A, agency to agency, where agencies communicate with other agencies for the information wherever the disaster is hit. The resource sharing is primary purpose of conducting effective interaction, and the agency is coordinating and collaborating for the losses and what are the needs. This can be like UN is asking for the Pakistani state, or anywhere else. They're communicating and collaborating what is going on in the country. The second form of emergency communication is emergency to community, A to C interaction, where most of the disasters have extremely adverse consequences on human life as well as society. So when agencies are communicating with the community, like the people on the ground who are reporting what is going on, and the real-time reports are being given to the agencies or the state who cannot reach to the disaster-struck area. The third kind of emergency communication is community to community, called C2C interaction, which is also necessary to educate people when community or talk with other community people, like people are talking with each other through social media apps like WhatsApps, Instagram, and now TikTok as well, to reach the disaster-stricken areas and to overcome what has been what is the loss. So the disaster management cycle has the four points: preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. So when the disaster is coming, we have to be prepared. So for the preparedness comes under the activities that aim for capacity building needed efficiently when the disaster strikes. It also means what measures have been taken before the cyclone is coming, before the flood is coming, before the earthquake is happening or going to happen, because most of the disasters nowadays are forecasted. And we get not much, but we get time to prepare for to minimize the loss. The second point is response, where response is to preserve lives, decrease the severity of health consequences, guarantee public safety, and how the state or the people are responding to the disaster and to the efforts they've put in preparedness. Because when, like for example, in Odisha in 2019, there was a cyclone. I forgot the name. Okay, there was a cyclone which was hit, and they evacuated almost 2.9 million people from that area to other area. So if somebody is refusing to leave their area, that comes under response, how they're responding to your preparedness. There comes the recovery, the activities of restoring and improving their livelihoods and health, as well as the economic, physical, social, cultural, and environmental assets, systems, and activities. Like after the disaster has been struck, what are the losses? How can we recover from those losses? Of course, we cannot cover from human loss, but we can recover for like infrastructure loss and other financial losses. And then comes mitigation, which means to be prepared and to diminish anything that is going to occur in future, which is going to be detrimental for the state and for the people, and which might come in the future. So mitigation phase means public education and awareness, hazard and vulnerability assessment, that how hazardous something was and how vulnerable we are in the future. And we have to assess that. And then we have to improve the infrastructure and other things for related to that disaster. Because if I talk about Pakistan is being hit every year with massive floods, and we face a lot of human loss, a lot of infrastructure loss in our northern region, and then every next year that happens all over again. So the prepared phase means national emergency telecommunication and response plans. How are you communicating that? You are communicating that from social media, from all the apps people are using. You need to have like training exercises, early warning standard SOPs that people follow when some hazardous or some disaster is coming. Then come recovery phase, when you have to restore all the telecommunications, you have to build all the infrastructure. You have to, when people who are displaced come back to their hometowns, and they have to build their lives all over again. Also, rehabilitation centers and services. And response phase means communication and coordination on ground within people who are facing that, and between state to agencies who are helping and who are there to like help us. So in December 19, so I had like 4 case studies that I discussed. In December 19, there was a cyclone Bulbul in Bangladesh, and the government preparedness program, they evacuated 2.1 million people to safety. Bangladesh, this was the massive cyclone that hit after 1999's cyclone. So before that, all the cyclones that hit Bangladesh, or the cyclone that hit Bangladesh in 1970 that killed 500,000 people. So this was the mitigation phase that they built the shelters for 2.1 million people and moved them to the safety. Of course, there was a lot of financial and infrastructure loss in this, but the human lives were saved, and there were only 19. Somewhere it's reported 19, somewhere it's reported like 49 lives that were lost. So when you are ready to mitigate, or you are ready to mitigate the disaster that has struck us, and now you're ready to prepare the people for it to happen in future, anywhere in future. You try to build everything, and you try to make things effective. For example, in 2020, like UN, UNICEF, WHO were actively providing updated information over COVID-19, how to avoid that, how to stay safe. And those were like disseminated through videos, through on every social media platform, which really helped people next year to keep them safe, and that also enhance or introduce the safety of people with having masks and keeping everybody safe around them. Then there was dengue fever in Pakistan 2016 and 2006 and 2018. There was a massive outbreak in 2011 in Lahore, where Pakistan launched a Merli-Project effort to combat the epidemic. There was a phone-based disease helpline system that was introduced, and there was a toll-free number.
1 minute.
Okay. Let's cut it short. Of course, I've also talked about 2010 Pakistani floods. That was in response phase. The people use their social media accounts to navigate and to talk to people on the ground that was happening. So basically, I wanted to talk that there are also a lot of gaps in the studies, how effective the social media communication is that people are doing within themselves on ground. But since this was a case study, qualitative paper, I just studied the case studies and how the people connecting through social media helped mitigate prepared response and helped in recovery. So yeah, thank you so much.
Right. So fascinating. I was I'm also remiss that I had to cut you off sooner than anyway, finish your presentation. But I am very curious about with social media, there's a lot of I think heavy discussion around misinformation, information accuracy. So how do you navigate disaster preparedness where even just, if the information is trustworthy, people knowing the navigating even just the fear of misinformation or whether, trustworthiness of
So
information.
yeah, that's I do understand that with the social media, there's a lot of um a lot of uh, m- margin of having a misinformation, but uh, because the good thing is the state is adapting the social media. Like your state has their own social media official pages, and only that information is reliable, whatever they are uh, telling the people through their social media accounts. There's somebody that this so and so is coming. We are putting a smart lockdown in this area, and you have to take care of that. And all the departments have their official accounts, and people should rely on the official websites and official social media handles for the information. Of course, people are communicating on ground, but for the official and reliable sources, we should and people should rely on the official social media handles, which are everywhere now. Like I have seen it on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, WhatsApp, you name it.
Kristin, you're muted.
Okay, excellent. So we have a bit of extra time for audience questions, discussion among the panelists. We had a fourth panelist who's unfortunately unable to make it at the last minute, so we have some extra time here. One question to start it off, and audience members, I'll open it up for wider kind of less Q&A and more really involved conversation in a minute. But I am very curious for all the panelists of what is kind of as you've been listening to the other panelists, are there areas where there's overlap or areas where things that struck you and are surprising to you or of interest to you, I should say.
I think just to start with, almost all environmental issues, concerns, and climate change concerns are generally overlaps. Like, for instance, like the disaster that Aleena was mentioning, it's also as symptoms of like climate change, not like disasters occur because of climate change, but also it is increasing. In fact, impacts are happening, and how we respond to all of these issues and how are the governance structure for it. They are all interlinking with each other because it is never about generally the technical solution. It's about creating social paradigms that speaks to people, policymakers, communities to be more effective.
Aleena or Safwan, was there anything for either of you? Okay, so opening it up to the wider audience, I'm also curious what resonated the most with all of you today. Was there a finding or an argument that challenged how you think about climate vulnerability or resilience or the interconnected, very complex dynamics of multidisciplinary challenges and the solutions they need? And what stood out to all of you, or questions, or if you have questions for the panel? And Carrie, if you're there, I'm not sure. I can't see audience members, so
I think
they're
Larry
able
has
to-
a question.
I see that
He's
Larry has
raising
a
his.
question. Larry,
Oh,
if you'd
great.
like,
Okay.
you can throw that in the Q&A. If not, I can allow you to speak. One might be coming through, and if not, we can give him that permission. Larry, if you still have a question, we can take it through the Q&A, or you can request to speak again, and I can give you that that permission. Kristin, are you able to see the question we just got
Yeah.
from
Yep.
Laura? Perfect.
Yeah. And so Laura asks, each of these scenarios presents multiple challenges. Are there solutions that can provide multiple solutions at the same time? I'd love to hear where people are working together in the solution space. So where is there kind of more, are there opportunities for more efficient? Two birds, one stone. And I think that's to the wider, to panelists and wider audience.
I can start. So all of these issues are very complex, embedded into social and political system of like where it is happening. So I think the context is so important. I think there will be some solutions that can work for multiple cases, but still it will be depending on the actors who will implement the solution, because it doesn't matter the regulations and law, it's still depending on how they interpret, how they use them. Also context sensitivity too, because even the similar issues, it might not be similar when we are zooming in the issue itself. But that's a very good question.
And so Larry asks, I'm interested in evidence of multi-stakeholder collaboration resulting in policy change or improved practice. So is any of the panelists able to speak to that? Multi-stakeholder collaboration that results in policy change or improved practice.
Just to clarify, Larry, is it in any area, like an environmental issues, or are you asking for specific issue?
I would say speak to you can speak to any issue, and then if broadly within the issue areas presented. Yes.
Okay, I would just say that multi-stakeholder. Okay, when I'll talk from my perspective from disaster management cycle. So when I was working on this, I saw that even India has been hit by floods every year. They're hit by floods every year. But why don't India and Pakistan states collaborate together to have something together? There can be a peace over collective disaster. We can create, or states can create, or policymakers can create peace over something which is going to hit two or more countries together. But because of conflict and because of course, the obvious tension between two countries, they don't do this. So I seriously, I don't have solution for this right now, but I was thinking when states or major stakeholders from different countries can together sit on a same table and make a policy and make a solution for the disasters or any big that is going to hit two or more countries together, they can build a peace over it. Like we can call it environment peace building, and this is environmental peace building. When there are floods coming in India and Pakistan together, when there's COVID coming in India and Pakistan together, when there's dengue coming in India and Pakistan together. So this neighboring states can do that, but for that, the policymakers need to get together, sit together, and have like open hearts and do that. But of course, this hasn't happened yet.
And Safwan, just giving you a
Yes.
chance as well.
Yes, I am talking from Syria context. Integrated of stakeholders is very important, and one of the main gap in Syria we face, there are no full integrated for stakeholders, all stakeholders in development plan, in emergency plan. It is very big issue in Syria. And now in Syria, now in recovery stage, it is very important to take in our consideration integrated all stakeholders. I am talking all women, men, child in recovery stages in Syria. It's very important because most of people are affected by the conflict.
Great. And now we have a question from Janet. Great session. As we head into the fourth conference next week, what would the panelists like to see in terms of calls to action or recommendations for the NPACS community on climate change, disasters, conflict, and peace? So what would the panelists like to see in terms of calls to action or recommendations for the NPACS community? Specific to this. Yeah.
I mean, I'm in this community more than I think 4 years, so keep doing the great work. I don't know. I'm maybe biased, but I'm really inspired by all of your work. So I really don't have any recommendation.
So for me, sorry, for me, I have a lot of recommendations. Yes, because as you know, we cannot avoid the conflict, and in Syria, I am talking in Syria, we cannot avoid the conflict, we cannot avoid the climate change, but there are another solution. Can people help the let me decision maker around the world can help the vulnerable people in Syria at least to adapt with the climate change to reduce the impact of conflict in Syria. Really, we need to help the new government in Syria in designing strategies for long-term plan in Syria, for development plan for long-term in recovery stages. So it is very important to help the people, and this is the key messages from me to the member of conference.
More questions from the audience, please go ahead. In the meantime, I am very curious for each of you. Climate policy is often driven by urgency, yet your presentations today all seem to suggest that poorly designed interventions or kind of unintended consequences can spiral over kind of slow burn until they reach the crisis. So I'm curious, in a perfect world, how would you, instead of reacting to today's challenges, how would you kind of try to anticipate and divert or mitigate kind of future disasters or future challenges like that before they get to that urgent stage?
In Syria context, can I answer? Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, in Syria context, before the conflict, I remember very well. There are no governance for regarding the climate change. There are no plan for the adaptation strategies regarding the climate change. There are waves of drought affected Syria before the crisis. Most of people started to move from rural communities to big cities such as Damascus and Aleppo. This make a pressure on natural resource and make as such as in problem between the host community and the another people. I cannot say everything the reason why by climate change. No. There are another reason regarding the government. If there are policies, if there are justice in the country, we can avoid any conflict. Unfortunately, in Syria, we face most problem regarding the government. There are no policies. There are no qualified people in the government can study or put the scenarios for the all risk, climate change, conflict, absence of justice in Syria. This is the main issue. Now, I hope in the new government in Syria, we can avoid this problem by qualified people can and help from around the world, from researcher, from decision maker to help the new government to make new policy to adopt the climate change, to avoid conflict, to help people in Syria.
I would also would like to say from the social media perspective and the communication perspective that we need to acknowledge it first. I know a wide, wide number of people who do not acknowledge that climate change is happening. So we need to acknowledge it. We need to talk about it. We need to keep talking about it on our social media platforms. And people also don't understand how is this affecting? This is affecting very slowly. They don't understand carbon emissions. They don't understand greenhouse gases. They don't understand what's going on. It's very hot because it's very hot in Lahore right now, like burning, scalding hot, and it's very unusual hot. So the climate change is happening, and Lahore, Pakistan is affected by it. Is going to get affected by it in coming years very much. But I see very less people talking about it. And there is this trend here, whoever talks about it, they're not taken seriously. You know, there's very small small number of people, a group who are talking about it, who are trying to educate people. So I just want that our government or anybody's government, or any state government should acknowledge it on the state level. So people should take it seriously. And when they're going to take it seriously, they're going to educate themselves. And when they're going to educate themselves, they're going to follow the SOPs, the everything we are trying to do to make things different, or make like the big giants listen to us. Yeah.
Okay, so I am going to put all three panelists in the hot seat a little bit and ask a few semi-lightning round questions. So feel free to expand as you like, but short answers are okay too. So for each of you, which poses the greatest risk today, or the greater risk today, I should say? Climate change itself, the impact of climate change within conflicts, or the way that institutions respond to it?
I go first.
Go ahead.
The institutions. Can I go first? I mean, I wanted to say
Yes,
the
please.
way institutions respond to this. Yeah, they're responding to this.
Okay. Buket?
Sure. So that's a very hard question. I think combination of all of it and staying connected, because there's also a lot of like misinformation and disinformation regarding all of this. So it is important to be aware of like what information is out there and how it's speaking to the people. Again, it depends on the context. I cannot say climate change is the more or conflict is more. They are very interlinking with each other. So I think staying inactive for any of this is the greatest threat.
That brings
For-
me. Oh, Safwan,
For
go
me,
ahead.
yes, for me,
Yes.
the impact of climate change and the way to respond by the government, because we cannot avoid climate change. For example, when I lived in Turkey, I remember Turkey affected by climate change, but there are policy to adaptation and strategies from the government. So when we compare that with Syria, it is it is big distance between Turkey and Syria. In Syria, we affected by impact of climate change, and there are no strategies to adaptation from government.
Fair. Yeah, safe. Well, very similar. Safwan, we'll start with you this time then. If you had to choose just one priority, better governance, more funding, or better information, which do you think would deliver the biggest improvement for resilience to these challenges, interlinked challenges? And I'll ask Buket and Aleena as well. So better governance, more funding, or better information? If you
I
had to
can go
prioritize
for
only one. Yeah.
definitely governance structure, because when we are also giving like examples like failures, they are not necessarily like some organizations are malice or bad intentions. They are functioning in an environment that funding is limited, policy affects a lot, and there's always like the revenue constraints. So expecting voluntary compliance from all actors is a governance failure by design, in my opinion. So having strong governance system, it can be very helpful for any of these issues.
I would go with the same, the better governance, because governance, because effective governance prevents the mismanagement of resources and ensures that climate action is equitable and it's positive and it's going forward, you know.
Regarding Syria, yes, governance is a priority also, because helps new government to make strategies for the future.
Okay. Yeah, fair. I guess that also goes back into better governance and helps anticipate future challenges before they become urgent crises. So we, in this space, I think everybody has maybe and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but kind of, areas that you may feel, what's one area that in climate adaptation strategy, for example, that gets maybe too much attention or one that doesn't get enough attention. So like kind of one area in your field of expertise that you think gets enough attention or too much and one that doesn't get enough.
Since my presentation was about carbon markets, so as a solution, carbon markets get a lot of attention. And there are some issues regarding to this. Carbon markets can be a complementary solution for climate change, but it it is not the main solution. And there's something called moral hazard, which means that if like this kind of complementary solutions are very popular, it might divert the attention from finding systemic solution to the actual problem. So climate change is happening and it requires systemic solution. These are considered as band-aid solutions. They are not the main solutions, but the more its usage increase, the more money is invested into that. So it creates opportunities and threats.
So in my area, I would say that the community level preparedness gets the least attention because because one, the community level preparedness, and the other is PTSD for the people who have gone through the trauma of losing homes and losing lives, or losing their loved ones, because at least nobody talks about that the disaster has hit. We are in recovery phase, but we not only have to build infrastructures, we also have to take care of the people who have gone through traumas and introduce the psychiatric helps or psychological helps, because they are going through PTSDs and they are going to take that trauma lifelong. So yeah.
For Syria context, as everyone know, climate change and environmental degradation, it is not a priority in conflict countries such as Syria. So most of people in the government now are interested in rebuilding. So they didn't consider the climate change risk and land degradation in the next stage of recovery. It is a big mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. So